Would you come down, please?
Yes.
By the time they're down on a tree,
Pardon me?
by the time they're down on a tree.
Okay. Okay, you may be seated. Yeah.
Good afternoon. It's still morning. Sorry, it's been a long day. Doctor, talking about generally stippling, stifling, comes, if this, I'm holding up the pointer, the back end of the pointer, the thick end, the barrel of the gun here. Do we have agreement with that?
Yes.
If this gun fires a projectile, the first thing that comes out, and I'm not saying in order, but what would show nearness is soot stippling, correct?
Correct.
And then further out would be gunpowder stippling.
Yes, soot and then gunpowder.
Okay, and in the soot stippling, it has to be, generally speaking, as you said, either in contact or within a foot.
Yes, it's within a few inches. It's very close.
Okay, and when you looked at the state's exhibit, you said it was either very close or in contact, and we're talking about the hand wound.
Yes, it could be within that range. So it could have been in contact.
Okay, and as I said, if this is the barrel of the gun, this is my left hand, the barrel of the gun had to be somewhere in this area, correct?
That's correct.
Now, the soot stippling, and I'm pointing with the pointer to my baby finger, there is no soot stippling here, correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay. The bulk of it starts between what would be the ring and commonly referred to as middle finger.
Yes,
Okay, so that means the barrel of the gun, if not touching, would have been like this.
it's in that location. That's
Okay.
correct.
So that hand was over the barrel of Mr. Rittenhouse's gun when his hand was shot.
That makes sense.
Okay, and the bullet goes into the fingers and then out through here. And I'm showing the fat part of the in between my index and thumb.
Yes, the exit is to the index finger, but it's on the back of the lateral side of that finger, yes.
And exhibit 105, please. What we just went over, I'm showing you an exhibit, be up on the screen. It's been marked Defense Exhibit 105. You see that photo, exhibit?
Yes,
Okay, and that's Mr. Rosenbaum's hand,
his left hand, correct.
left hand, and you took that photograph, correct?
Yes.
Circle on here to the best of your ability where the soot starts.
Yeah.
Okay, can you draw a line off of there into where it can be seen and then just put your initials? And you've put the circle on the ring finger, correct?
Correct.
Leaving the baby finger uncircled and blank, correct?
Correct. I don't
'Cause
see
there's-
any.
You don't see any soot there, right?
Correct.
Would move Exhibit 105 into evidence.
Objection?
No,
Proceed.
Would ask to publish it to the jury.
it's already on the
The
screen.
objection. Okay, go ahead.
The- Now, you would agree that this shooting of Mr. Rosenbaum, which is captured partially on video, is a dynamic situation, correct?
Correct.
And if the furthest he was away with the stifling that you see in the wounds was 4 feet and closing, that goes very quickly, correct? If someone's running at you,
Yes.
okay? And 4 feet, correct me if I'm wrong, is about from me to you away.
That's about correct.
And if I had my hands out, I'm even closer, correct?
Yes.
If I'm lunging and going for your gun, which is an extension away from your body, closer still.
Yes.
And you saw the video that Dr. Jensen reviewed, and he was running, correct?
He was.
The wound in the back, when you talk about, I can get out to that word, anatomically correct position?
Atomic position, yes.
That's, as I'm standing here before you, standing straight, with you said palms forward.
Correct. Anatomic position.
Okay.
I think you had me doing it.
Okay. And the wound enters his back,
That's correct.
okay, and goes down and across.
Correct.
Okay, we're not, and I know the prosecution covered it, but we're not saying that he was turned and shot in the back, correct?
That's correct.
There's nothing in the hand shot that shows him, would lead you to believe that his hands are up like this surrendering, correct?
That's correct. I did not see that in the video.
And your theory or your belief to a reasonable degree of medical certainty is that he's in a horizontal position close to my client. The bullet goes in and across and down.
That's correct.
Okay? So once again, in the position of lunging would put you in a horizontal position, correct?
It would.
And there's some stippling to the wound in the pelvis, correct?
Yes, to the lower abdomen above
Okay,
it.
and that's not trying to, but there, it starts at the belt line and goes up, correct?
That's right.
Okay, and as it starts at the belt line and goes up, the reason it's not below the belt line is because he was wearing pants when he was shot, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And that was also, that was gunpowder stippling.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's basically 1 foot to 4 feet.
Yes.
And hate to jump around here, but the wound on Mr. Huber, I'm assuming at some point you pulled off that bandage that was on the wound?
Yes,
Okay, now, was there stippling on that wound?
there was. Yes.
Okay, and that wound was what kind of stippling?
Well, gunpowder stippling, so that wound has the impacts from the gunpowder particles.
Okay.
A more dense distribution.
Did you look at the clothing around the wound?
On Mr. Huber?
On Mr. Huber?
Yes.
Okay, and the clothing also had gunpowder residue?
A little more difficult to say on the clothing. Mr. Huber's tank top, which was the item of clothing that came with him, that tank top it was a tie-dyed black and gray and white appearance, so made that very difficult. So in those situations, usually I will defer to try to opine if I can't tell for sure.
Okay, so there's nothing in that gunshot wound that suggests that he wasn't in close contact with my client's firearm.
That's right.
Okay, and did you look at any video regarding that shooting?
Yes, it's also included in that video provided.
The video shows that my client's lying on his back, correct?
Yes,
Mr. Huber grabs the firearm, correct?
it appears so, yes.
Pulls the firearm from one direction towards and into his chest, correct?
They end up in that position. I don't know if he's pulling or what. I don't know what's going on there.
Mr. Huber strikes him with the skateboard. The gun is not in his chest. Fair statement?
That fair statement.
Okay. When he's shot, the skateboard is in his right hand. The gun is now up in his chest.
However, Jack, these are conclusions based on
I'm asking if his wound is consistent with this scenario.
Go ahead. Finish your question.
Okay. I'll start over. Mr. Huber, you see him hit my client in the head with a skateboard, correct?
Yes.
And
The objection.
these are conclusions that Mr. Huber hit or did anything is central to this case. These are not conclusions that anyone can make but the jury.
He said, the doctor said he watched the video, and so I'm assuming that that's his knowledge base. And you can redirect on the subject if you want.
I'll start again, sir. There is a blow from Mr. Huber to my client's head with a skateboard, correct?
Yes, the skateboard makes contact
Okay.
with Mr.
He swings the skateboard with his right hand into my client's back neck range, correct?
I'm not sure where it makes impact, but
You see an impact.
yeah, it makes contact.
And he reaches down with his left hand, seeming to grab my client's gun, correct?
Yes.
When he puts his hand on the gun, the barrel is not pointing in his chest, correct?
I don't recall, but I don't think so.
Okay. And through whatever movement between my client and Mr. Huber, the gun barrel ends up, which would be right about here,
It does.
okay? And there's a gunshot, correct?
Yes.
And that gun is touching his clothes.
It's in intermediate range. It's
So,
closer.
and define intermediate range for me, please.
Well, again, we've talked about how intermediate range injuries can be within 4 feet, but it obviously from the video it's closer than that. But I can't say whether the muzzle is in contact with
Okay.
his
But
clothing.
through the type of stippling that you have on the Huber wound, you know it's less than 4 feet. Fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
Through independent evidence, which you review as a forensic pathologist / investigator, the video evidence establishes closer.
It does.
And just assume, for the purposes of this question, that the first shot from my client, moving back to Mr. Rosenbaum now, is the 0 shot, number 1. The fourth shot is 76 hundredths of a second after that. That is how fast the 4 shots were fired out of my client's gun. And goes from the furthest 4 feet to touching the gun, correct?
Yes.
That calls for speculation.
Doctor answered yes. Overall,
And your opining regarding the order of shots, is that to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty or medical certainty? I apologize.
Medical certainty, as I pointed out, from the autopsy findings alone, you can't put these in order. It's only by reviewing the video and simply looking at the orientation of his body and comparing that to the findings on the body that you can do that. So to that degree of certainty, it appears that he's in that horizontal position.
And Mr. Krause asked it, the shot to the pelvis, you think is first?
I think that makes the most sense.
Okay. The shot that goes in the scalp, second?
No, I think that the only orientation that makes sense with the trajectory of the gunshot wound to the back and the right side of the head is when he's in more of a horizontal position. So those two injuries must be the third and the fourth injuries. But that's the best I can do.
The head wound goes back to front and from the top of the head down towards the forehead.
That's right.
Okay, so if I was charging like a bull and diving, that would be consistent.
It would be.
I have nothing further.
Redirect.
Doctor, the injuries you noted, they'd also be consistent with falling after being struck in the hip?
Yes.
So if Mr. Rosenbaum was struck in the hip, that his momentum kept carrying him forward, he was falling, the other three shots could have been as he was falling.
That's possible too.
It's consistent with that.
It is.
What is a muzzle stamp?
Well, a muzzle stamp is what we briefly talked about earlier with contact gunshot wounds, and if the energy of the bullet entering the body causes the skin to smack against the muzzle of the gun, it can leave an abrasion, even a patterned abrasion in the shape of the muzzle of the gun on the skin. And so a muzzle stamp is a term that's used for a contact abrasion that's associated with a contact gunshot wound. And the reason why when we talked about a close range wound to the hand, the reason why we didn't talk about that, although it could be in close range like that, is because the skin of the palm is much thicker, and it very seldom, if ever, allows for a muzzle stamp or an abrasion of that sort. Certainly not like you would see with a contact wound to the head or to the chest.
So there was no muzzle stamp in this case?
No.
Okay, I'd like to ask Investigator Stu to pull up Exhibit 41, but as we're doing that, Doctor, if this is the gun, if you could stand up, please. If I'm holding a rifle, let's just say that I've shot you in the hip, how does it make sense that the gunshot to the hand occurs in the trajectory you've indicated?
So if this points in the direction. Oh, thank you.
Can you just stand back
Hold
there?
that.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, so we're talking about the left hand. The injuries are to the palmar surface of the index and the middle fingers. The exit is to the side of the index finger So obviously it's hard to do this completely, but it's like this. So in the anatomic position, it looks like that, but keeping in mind that your arm and your hand move in a lot of different ways. So, so if you were to take the hand and you were to be in a position in which the hand was like this with the palm kind of downward, you could orient this so that you could explain the gunshot wound going down and hitting the pavement, and then the fragments hitting the left side of the thigh.
If you could put your hand out again, doctor, like you had. So, but the barrel would have to be behind the injury, correct?
Yes.
So the bullet would have had to travel outside of the barrel, so the barrel would have been had to have been in front of or somehow separated from where the wound took place.
Well, that's what I said. I can't tell that. This is a close range wound with soot, but there isn't going to be a muzzle stamp because of the skin of the palm. So it's within that distance, but whether it's in contact or whether it's just in front of it, of the entrance portion of the wound, or inches away, that's not something I can tell you.
That orientation you just indicated be consistent with swiping something away? Swiping a barrel away?
I can't tell you what he was doing at the time that happened. All I can tell you is that at the time of the discharge of the weapon and the traveling of that bullet into his hand, this is the trajectory that it took through his hand. I can't tell you what he was doing at the time, and I can't see it on the video. The video's not good enough for that.
Exhibit 41, please. Could holding something in your hand, could that impact the wounds or the stippling or the soot or anything of that nature?
You mean, well, I mean, if you're holding something in your hand and you're referring to some kind of something that's going to create an intermediary target or something, yeah, that can affect the appearance of wounds. You know, the injury might look very different in that case.
So when Attorney Richards was talking to you about the wound to Mr. Rosenbaum's left hand, and there's blood everywhere and there's soot in many places, if he was holding, say, a handle of something, would you expect that the soot and the
This calls for speculation. There's been no evidence whatsoever that he had anything in his hand.
Questions must be asked to a reasonable degree of post-mortem autopsy certitude. Would that be a fair way to put it?
I'm not really sure I understand the question.
You're not the first. You hesitated before when asked about medical certitude, which is a common expression we use in the courts, and I'm trying to see what degree of, how would you phrase the degree of certitude with which you would typically respond?
Well, I can testify to a reasonable degree of medical certainty when I'm using the autopsy findings and the meaning of those in reference to the injuries. I've seen the video. As I have testified, I discussed the video with regards to his position when I heard the gunshot wounds discharge. I can't really see what's going on in front of him at those times. So when the questions are going into those specifics, I don't think I can answer those from the video that I watched. So I think I'm trying to be careful not to evaluate that video more than I used it for, which is to determine what position he was in when those gunshot wounds were received.
Why don't you rephrase your question? What's required here for the state certainly, but frankly for both parties, but is a degree of certitude to which the physician can testify.
The injuries and everything you testified to on the left hand, that's consistent with nothing being in his hand?
It is, yes.
Thank you. I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 41. If you can tell, is this the video that you reviewed in terms of both the shooting deaths of Mr. Rosenbaum and Mr. Huber?
It is.
I'd ask you to play the video until I ask you to stop. Can you see where on there you indicate that he would be positioned with the first shot?
Yes, I can clearly see the reflection of light on his back, and I can see that he's upright when the first shot is heard.
So that would not be consistent with the shot to the hand?
No, I think that's, I think that placing the hand in that position would affect the gunpowder stippling to his lower abdomen. So I don't think the hand is involved in that first shot.
So, to the best of your, so it's consistent that the first shot is to the hip,
That's what I think, yes.
and then the second shot would be to the hand.
Yes.
And then the third or fourth shot, can you order those any more specifically?
No.
But they would be as he's in a horizontal position, perhaps falling after being struck in the hip.
That's right.
Let's show Exhibit 86, please. Please play the exhibit. I'll ask you to pause it. Pause. Doctor, did you see that large amount of smoke that was emitted from the gun?
Yes.
Now, with that amount of smoke out of an AR-15, would that impact how far the stippling may occur?
Would the smoke impact?
The large amount of smoke. Would the stippling go further out than the 4 feet?
No, I don't think there's not a relationship there. The stippling is the gunpowder particles that are flying through the air and dispersing as they travel. The smoke is the smoke and soot from the barrel of the gun.
Does the amount of gunpowder matter in the stippling?
Well, yes,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it does. I mean, you know, there's the number of gunpowder particles that leave the barrel of the gun are not predictable, certainly, but they will, you know, travel in a dense group and then disperse as they get farther away, with more and more falling to the side until none have the energy to create stippling to the skin.
Now, when you see that large puff of smoke, you said that would be, that is what would potentially leave soot on a individual?
My presumption is that soot, that puff was the smoke and soot from the end of the gun.
So with that large amount of soot, would it be possible to deposit soot further out than just a few inches?
I don't know if I can answer that question. Again, you know, test firing the weapon, you might be able to derive more information, but certainly soot's not very aerodynamic. It doesn't travel very far.
Now, Attorney Richards did a demonstration with you where he stood about 4 feet away and talked about the intermediate range. Now, in talking about intermediate range, you're talking about feet from the barrel of the gun, not from the shooter?
Correct. To be specific, the injuries that we're talking about are from the barrel of the gun to the surface that they make impact with. So the surface of the body in this case.
And you haven't seen the actual weapon in this case, have you?
No, I have not.
That's on the stand over there.
Oh, it's in the stage, yeah.
Oh. So, I'm going to ask Detective Venturini to point the gun at me.
Check it again. Yeah. Check it again.
No need.
Show you. Empty.
So if he was to point the gun at me, I'd have to be 4 feet from the barrel of this gun, or 1 to 4 feet to generate the stippling you're talking about?
Inside of 4 feet, like I said, that's an outside number.
Is that approximately where I would be right now?
It's about 4 feet, maybe a little closer.
I'll get a ruler, but that's more than 4 feet.
It would be my impression that is a greater distance than 4 feet.
Well, I'm not bad at distances. Is this 4 feet approximately?
It's a little hard to tell, but you're closer. You're probably about 4 feet there.
More than one of my arm's lengths anyway?
More than one of your arm's length.
Thank you. I'd rather further.
Rick Ross?
Doctor, the soot is within 6 inches, correct? The soot stippling?
Oh, the soot. The soot is within inches.
The intermediate gunpowder stippling is within 4 feet.
Approximately, yes.
And if the first shot is, you can hold it. Here, detective. Keeping it down. If this is the barrel of the gun and the 0 shot is the first shot, and somewhere from, and I'm not as good as or as bad, I don't know, but let's say this is about 4 feet from the barrel of the gun.
It's a little farther than 4 feet, I would say.
Okay, so I'm even a little bit further, but from the furthest he is would be 4 feet. He could have been as close as here with the first shot, correct?
Possibly, but the density of the gunpowder stippling it's pretty spread out, so I think it's a little further away.
And I'm using my right hand because I'm left-handed.
You know, these gloves got into court here about 10 years ago, and I understand there are appropriate times to use them, but not everything that,
I don't know why I'm using it.
I don't know why
Just
you're
what I
putting a
do.
glove on, to be
Okay.
honest with you. You're not going to get the cooties from that.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
These are bigger.
So here,
Well, what difference does it make? It's
the end of the gun, touching with my left hand like this. The heavy soot is right here.
Well, you're with your right hand, but yeah,
The heavy See, then I gotta go to the other side.
Yeah,
of the
you have to
jury.
turn around.
Can you switch with me? So if it's the left hand, we're gonna go like right. Can you see this, doctor?
You actually have to turn your hand over.
Over, like
And-
this?
No, go the opposite direction, like this.
Like,
There you go.
okay. And you would then come in approximately here,
That's the entry point to the hand, yes.
exiting where I'm pointing with my index finger.
Correct.
And the reason there's no soot stippling here is because it's past where fire comes up.
I can only say that there's no soot there.
Okay, there's no, okay.
I know these people are here for news purposes, the photographers, but I actually think for purposes of the record, I'd like them to come up and get a closer shot.
Am I positioning my hand correct?
I believe so.
It would be more like this because the exit wound is right here, as I pointed to.
Yes.
And just so the record's clear, my hand is touching the end of the barrel.
Your hand is now touching the barrel.
Okay, and if my hand were in front of the barrel, there would be soot here. And I'm pointing now to, what would you call this part of the
I would call it the outside of the pinky finger so that it's understandable.
The outside of the pinky finger, if my hand was in front of the barrel, the heaviest soot would be in that location, correct?
You would expect soot in that location.
And
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but some of the jurors I don't think are able to see, so let's, you got your shot. So, you go ahead.
the pinky finger, once again illustrating the side of my hand, if it was in front of the barrel, as it's now depicted, the heaviest soot would be here.
You would expect some soot on that side of the hand.
Okay, and there's,
And I didn't see any.
Would you send copies of those photos, send copies of those photos to the clerk, please? Send copies of those photos to the clerk? Thank you.
So doctor, is it consistent if I'm approaching the detective and I'm struck in my hip, fracturing my hip, that I would fall, reach out with my hand and try to knock the gun away?
That's a possibility.
Am I positioning my hand correctly with the evidence?
Your hand is, you put your hand over
Well, we don't know if it's over, so.
like this.
Oh.
Well, just in a position so that the soot is on the palmar surface,
Like this?
like this. So if you go in and you,
So the entrance wound is here.
no, the entrance wound is on the palmar surface, the undersurface.
Palmar surface.
So if you do it, Superman, and then turn your hand a little bit like this, you can put it in a position that there you go,
Like this.
like that.
So what you're saying is consistent with being shot here, momentum carry forward, and swiping at the gun. That would be consistent with the injuries you found.
Those scenarios are possible.
But my hand is positioned correctly to create the injuries that you found.
But that's the position that the hand has to be in.
And then the bullet would have traveled down and potentially kicked up some bullet fragments and concrete and hit my leg.
That's what I think happened.
And then I would have continued down, and then the shot to the head and the mid-back would have occurred as I was falling down.
As you're more horizontal to the ground, yes.
Thank you, nothing further.
Doctor, when you get shot the first time, that doesn't cause you to go forward, correct?
It shouldn't cause you to go forward, backward, or
Okay,
anything.
so he already, Mr. Rosenbaum, already had to have forward momentum at a force to go from the 0 shot to the second shot in 2.26 hundredths of a second to be in contact or right on top of that barrel, correct?
Yes, he had forward momentum.
Thank you.
Nothing further. Nothing further.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. You may step down. Let's break for lunch. It has just arrived, I think, and we'll take until around 12:30. Any questions? Okay, please don't talk about the case. Read, watch, or listen to any account. See you later. On occasion, when things don't, they're not going to show up well in the record, I'll either myself or have one of the parties take a picture. So we have experts to do it today, and the price was right. Mark? Send them to Mrs. Yeah.
What time would you like us back?
12:30.
Your Honor, I do want to indicate on the record now that the state intends to rest. We've had some discussions regarding the testimony of Brandon Cramen. My understanding from the defense is that I think there's an agreement that essentially the court will just inform the jury that his testimony should be disregarded, and we're not going to go back into that.
Stricken.
Okay.
Right.
Fair enough.
So I don't know when we want to address any motions outside the presence of the jury, but that's what I intend to do when we return.
Okay. Are there going to be any motions?
Little.
Huh?
One.
Okay. Okay.
Once they officially rest, that's what's happened?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Do we need to go over criminal records for any witnesses?
Yeah, I think we do. Your Honor, I'll tell you what it is. I'm not trying to hide from the court. They have not put in any evidence regarding a lawful order for a curfew violation. We'll be moving to dismiss that. We'll be renewing our objection to the count 6, but the court has already ruled, just so it's not waived. I think then we're ready to go.
All right. Yes, to the 7th count, did you want to address that there's no evidence on the...
We've had testimony from the detective that a curfew was in place.
It's not a lawful order.
Did he testify as to by whom the order had been issued?
No.
I don't know about that one. Yeah, I would expect that there would have to be just the mere statement that a detective said that there was a curfew in effect doesn't really satisfy the burden of proof. I will permit you to reopen the evidence, however. No, I don't want to. This is.
Well,
I'm pretty.
You haven't closed yet.
he just said he closed. That's why I brought it
No.
up.
You know
But, Your
what?
Honor, I'll say this.
You know what? There are some judges. When I went to judges training years. This is back a long time ago. Right after I came on the bench, I sat down with some judges, and one was from Madison and was testifying about this. She didn't know what to do because she's got the pending burglary case, and she says they didn't prove that the city of, I'm going to say Middleton, but maybe it was Madison, one of the two, didn't prove that it was in Dane County, and she didn't know whether to grant the motion to dismiss or not. And I didn't say anything, but I thought to myself, you've got to be kidding me. We're here to get to the truth of things, and I don't want to mess around with an error in presentation of that magnitude or what's the opposite of magnitude?
That he didn't have the authority in another court to issue that order.
That is another issue. So actually, the easy course would be to grant your motion, so I won't have to enter the thicket that the other judge did. But I'll take it. I'll take this weighty matter under advisement. Yeah, I know it. I know it. I'm not going to dismiss it on the ground that it wasn't proved. Whether I grant it on the basis that Judge Russell did is another matter. I'll have to take a look at that. And then I'd like you to submit in the next day proposed instructions, modified version of 2176 with the, because Mr. Kraus did a nice job on the brief and reported what the instructions committee said. And so I'd like both sides to submit proposed instructions on 2176. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, enjoy your lunch.